Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Cameron.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Greg.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time we read about the coming of the children of Ilúvatar. The Valar convened and discussed Melkor's growing influence. Varda created many new stars to provide some light for the elves who were destined to enter into the world in darkness. Today we continue chapter 3 of Quenta Silmarillion. In the beginning, the elder children of Ilúvatar were stronger and greater than they have since become, but not more fair. For though the beauty of the Quendi in the days of their youth was beyond all other beauty that Ilúvatar has caused to be, it has not perished, but lives in the west, and sorrow and wisdom have enriched it. And Orome loves the Quendi, and named them in their own tongue Eldar, the people of the stars. But that name was after borne only by those who followed him upon the westward road. Yet many of the Quendi were filled with dread at his coming. And this was the doing of Melkor. For by after-knowledge the wise declare that Melkor, ever watchful, was first aware of the awakening of the Quendi, and sent shadows and evil spirits to spy upon them and waylay them. So it came to pass, some years ere the coming of Orome, that if any of the elves strayed far abroad, alone or few together, they would often vanish and never return. And the Quendi said that the hunter had caught them, and they were afraid. And indeed, the most ancient songs of the elves, of which echoes are remembered still in the west, tell of the shadow shapes that walked in the hills above Quivinian, or would pass suddenly over the stars, and of the dark rider upon his wild horse that pursued those that wandered to take them and devour them. Now Melkor greatly hated and feared the riding of Orome, and either he sent indeed his dark servants as riders, or he set lying whispers abroad, for the purpose that the Quendi should shun Orome, if ever they should meet. Thus it was that when Nehar neighed, and Orome indeed came among them, some of the Quendi hid themselves, and some fled and were lost. But those that had courage and stayed perceived swiftly that the great rider was no shape out of darkness, for the light of Aman was in his face, and all the noblest of the elves were drawn towards it. But of those unhappy ones who were ensnared by Melkor, little is known of a certainty. For who of the living has descended into the pits of Autumno, or has explored the darkness of the counsels of Melkor? Yet this is held true by the wise of Erisea, that all those of the Quendi who came into the hands of Melkor ere Autumno was broken were put there in prison, and by slow arts of cruelty were corrupted and enslaved. And thus did Melkor breed the hideous race of the Orcs in envy and mockery of the elves, of whom they were afterwards the bitterest foes. For the Orcs had life and multiplied after the manner of the children of Ilúvatar, and naught that had life of its own, nor the semblance of life, could ever Melkor make, since his rebellion in the Ainelundalai, before the beginning, so say the wise. And deep in their dark hearts the Orcs loathed the master whom they served in fear, the maker only of their misery. Thus it may be, was the vilest deed of Melkor, and the most hateful to Ilúvatar. Orome tarried a while along the Quendi, And then swiftly he rode back over land and sea to Valinor, and brought the tidings to Valmar. And he spoke of the shadows that troubled Cuivennen. Then the Valar rejoiced, and yet they were in doubt amid their joy. And they debated long what counsel it were best to take for the guarding of the Quendi from the shadow of Melkor. But Orome returned at once to Middle-earth and abode with the elves. Manwë sat long in thought upon Taniquetil, and he sought the counsel of Ilúvatar. And coming then down to Valmar, he summoned the Valar to the Ring of Doom. And thither came even Ulmo from the outer sea. Then Manwë said to the Valar, "This is the counsel of Ilúvatar in my heart, that we should take up again the mastery of Arda, at whatsoever cost, and deliver the Quendi from the shadow of Melkor." Then Tolkis was glad, but Aule was grieved, foreboding the hurts of the world that must come of that strife. But the Valar made ready, and came forth from Aman in strength of war, resolving to assault the fortress of Melkor and make an end. Never did Melkor forget that this war was made for the sake of the elves, and that they were the cause of his downfall. Yet they had no part in those deeds, and they know little of the riding of the might of the West against the North in the beginning of their days. Melkor met the onset of the Valar in the northwest of Middle-earth, and all that region was much broken. But the first victory of the hosts of the West was swift, and the servants of Melkor fled before them to Autumno. Then the Valar passed over Middle-earth, and they set a guard over Cuivennen. And thereafter the Quendi knew nothing of the great battle of the powers, save that the earth shook and groaned beneath them, and the waters were moved. And in the north there were lights as of mighty fires. Long and grievous was the siege of Autumno, and many battles were fought before its gates, of which naught but the rumor is known to the elves. In that time, the shape of Middle-earth was changed, and the great sea that sundered it from Aman grew wide and deep, and it broke in upon the coasts and made a deep gulf to the southward. Many lesser bays were made between the great gulf and Helcaraxe, far in the north, where Middle-earth and Aman came nigh together. Of these the Bay of Balar was the chief, and into it the mighty river Sirion flowed down from the new raised highlands northwards, Dorthonion and the mountains about Hithlum. The lands of the far north were all made desolate in those days, for there Autumno was delved exceeding deep, and its pits were filled with fires and with great hosts of the servants of Melkor. But at the last the gates of Autumno were broken, and the halls unroofed, and Melkor took refuge in the uttermost pit. Then Tulkas stood forth as champion of the Valar, and wrestled with him, and cast him upon his face. And he was bound with the chain Angainor that Aule had wrought, and led captive, and the world had peace for a long age. Nonetheless, the Valar did not discover all the mighty vaults and caverns hidden with deceit far under the fortresses of Angband and Autumno. Many evil things still lingered there, and others were dispersed and fled into the dark, and roamed in the waste places of the world, awaiting a more evil hour. And Sauron they did not find. But when the battle was ended, and from the ruin of the north great clouds arose and hid the stars, the Valar drew Melkor back to Valinor, bound hand and foot and blindfolded, and he was brought to the Ring of Doom. There he lay upon his face before the feet of Manwë and sued for pardon. But his prayer was denied, and he was cast into prison in the fastness of Mandos, whence none can escape, neither Vala, nor elf, nor mortal man. Vast and strong are those halls, and they were built in the west of the land of Aman. There was Melkor doomed to abide for 3 ages long, before his cause should be tried anew, or he should plead again for pardon. Then again the Valar were gathered in council, and they were divided in debate. For some, and of those Ulmo was the chief, held that the Quendi should be left free to walk as they would in Middle-earth, and with their gifts of skill to order all the lands and heal their hurts. But the most part feared for the Quendi in the dangerous world amid the deceits of the starlit dusk. And they were filled moreover with the love of the beauty of the elves and desired their fellowship. At the last, therefore, the Valar summoned the Quendi to Valinor, there to be gathered at the knees of the powers in the light of the trees forever. And Mandos broke his silence, saying, "So it is doomed." From this summons came many woes that afterwards befell. But the elves were at first unwilling to hearken to the summons, for they had as yet seen the Valar only in their wrath as when they went to war, save Arome alone, and they were filled with dread. Therefore Arome was sent again to them, and he chose from among them ambassadors who should go to Valinor and speak for their people. And these were Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë, who afterwards were kings. And coming they were filled with awe by the glory and majesty of the Valar, and desired greatly the light and splendor of the trees. Then Arome brought them back to Cuivennen, and they spoke before their people, and counseled them to heed the summons of the Valar, and remove into the west. Then befell the first sundering of the elves. For the kindred of Ingwe, and the most part of the kindreds of Finwë and Elwë, were swayed by the words of their lords, and were willing to depart and follow Arome. And these were known ever after as the Eldar, by the name that Arome gave to the elves in the beginning, in their own tongue. But many refused the summons, preferring the starlight and the wide spaces of Middle-earth to the rumor of the trees. And these are the Avari, the unwilling, and they were sundered in that time from the Eldar, and met never again until many ages were past.
All right. That was a.
Do I get
long...
the best readings? Is it? It's
there
so
was
epic.
There was a ton in here.
No, I got the dialogue reading that one time. So
yeah, that was a good one.
That looks cool, but man, the action, the plot.
Yeah, this is pretty sickening.
I think this had a lot of little details that really struck me. Yeah. But why don't we cover kind of what happened broadly?
Yeah, what happened?
So the Quendi are now in the world, right? Which is the name the elves gave to themselves, which mean those who speak, because they didn't know of others. So that's a kind of important term because they're referred to by that a lot. And also the Eldar, but that's a slight distinction.
That's just a different language, I think.
Right.
Quendi and Eldar.
So the Quendi are here, and the Valar are pretty worried about them, it seems, because Melkor is kind of just free to do his evil in the world. And this is maybe a small detail that's not worth going too much into, but I thought that was very interesting that because they're in darkness and Melkor just uses that kind of messed up, broken state of the world. He already messed up the world by spilling the lights, so that's why it's dark. And then he uses that against the elves to kind of sow suspicion in them against the Valar. And they start to perceive Orome as this dark hunter, this person of darkness who, and songs and rumors spread about him taking them and stuff. But those who encounter him realize that he's not evil. He actually has light emanating from his face, and he's good, and he befriends them. And he goes and tells the Valar that they're here, and they're all very excited because they are very affectionate towards the Quendi. And the Valar decide to make war on Melkor for the sake of the elves. I thought that was another really interesting point, that Melkor never did forget that this war was made for the sake of the elves.
Yes.
Like, he has this special hatred for them. And I think that's, okay, this is really terrible because I feel like every once in a while I read something that's a description of Melkor and think like, yeah, I've done that from time to time, like in the worst way, but where he kind of like, his own evil is what has led them to make war on him. But in his own mind, he rationalizes, well, they're doing this because of the elves. He's like, I don't know. I'm not proud of that. We all do bad things that sometimes, and we seek forgiveness for those things and try to grow. But that was just an interesting point about Melkor, that he like will never ever forget that the elves are why, like, the kind of what we're at stake here, and they're what led to his downfall.
An interesting note on that is that, and I don't know if this was said in the Lord of the Rings books, but explains the origin of the orcs. And I imagine Peter Jackson making Lord of the Rings, he would have to know some of this history to know how to make the orcs and what is the lore of the orcs. The orcs are elves gone bad, are elves that are tortured and corrupted and reproduced by Melkor originally, and then eventually by Sauron. So that was really interesting to me when I found out that what orcs were. They weren't a creation of Melkor because he can't create anything. He can just twist and torture and bend what Ilúvatar has made.
Yeah, Peter. I mean, I think it's in the Fellowship of the Ring. Peter Jackson actually has that as part of the script in there. I think either
Saruman says it. I think.
Saruman, yeah, Saruman
explains it. Something
he
like
explains
that.
it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then also, of course, like there's lots of mockeries, right? Because you have the Ents, and then you have cave trolls, which are in mockery of the Ents. And I think in Fellowship of the Ring, that's explained too. I think, but I might be wrong about that.
Can I point out one thing about this orc stuff too? I thought that was an interesting contrast with Aule, who did create dwarves.
Sorry, Greg, your mic continues
like
to go higher and higher. You're like,
this thing,
your pop filter is like slowly
just like covering her face. Eventually,
just like, sorry, I could not listen to a word you were saying. What did you say?
Thanks for pointing that out so people can see my nice face.
You have nice hair today. It's looking good.
Thank you. In contrast to Aule, he did create dwarves, even though they weren't really autonomous beings. He did create them, and then Ilúvatar blessed them. But the perversion of the elves to make the orcs is the most hateful thing to Ilúvatar, as it's described here.
Isn't that crazy? The most hateful thing is the mockery, twisting and corruption of the elves into orcs.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's so cool.
They also, just like that language in that part where I'll just read it again. The Quendi were put there in prison, and by slow arts of cruelty were corrupted and enslaved. That really reminded me of Smeagol's torturing. This slow art of cruelty. I believe that language is even used at least in Peter Jackson's depiction.
Isn't it cool how Melkor is wrestled by Tulkas and then bound by something? And who made the
Aule made the chain.
Aule makes the chain. Like
Angainor is the name of the chain.
Yeah, it has to have a name. The chain has to have a name.
Yeah.
There must be a band with that name.
Yeah.
I'll look that up later.
Well, we will start that band.
Yeah, let's just start it right now. It's our band.
We all sing vocals and play drums.
I just love it, but it's also interesting. I mean, what it made me think of is because he gets bound, right, and then he gets dragged essentially back to Valinor or wherever, and he's kept there, right? He's not killed. They should have just killed him. I'm sorry. I don't know if he can be killed, actually, but they should have bound him to something or figured out how to do that. I mean, one of the Aina or Valar should be able to do that. But they didn't. They gave him a chance and gave him 3 ages of just like...
Yeah, they're going to hear his case again because they rejected it outright. Yeah. They're giving him another chance. That is incredible.
It's just mind-blowing. It's like you trust that he can change. It's foreign to our way of thinking.
Well, what do you think? I mean, because you could argue, and maybe some of the Valar did, because they're not always in perfect agreement. But maybe he might be angrier by the end of 3 ages of being imprisoned, right? What do you think that was just folly to make that decision?
No, I think that I don't know, but I'm guessing that he either tricks them or I'm guessing that's the primary thing. He tricks them, or they make a judgment that, okay, he's probably not good, but hey, we've owned him once, we can own him again. Like, just like let him free. Without realizing what would come to pass. So I don't think they... I don't think it was like folly per se. It was either by his like pleading, but it's hard for me to imagine him groveling without it looking really cheesy. And like, okay, you're clearly still evil.
Sure.
It's just hard for me to imagine that with his pride. I mean,
at this
malice.
point, they're not. Well, one question I have is how long is 3 ages? But the other thing is, I don't think they can kill. I don't think the Valar can kill each other. I think they're eternal. I don't know of any Valar dying.
I don't know.
No, but I mean, we know that they can be bound to things.
Yeah, he's bound right now.
So he can be bound, but he can even be bound further than that. I mean, I guess I don't know of the creation of the Rings of Power.
Well, it does say he was cast into prison in the fastest of mountains.
But he binds himself to the life. I guess he bound himself. That was by choice, but that still means that he can be bound, right? It's like
right. Well, no, but it says. I mean, it says here
he was
the
cast
prison in which he's whence none can escape, neither Valar nor elf nor mortal man. So he is like.
So they could have kept him there.
Well, they are keeping him there. He's there now. They're keeping him there.
Sorry. But we know he escapes, okay? We know that Lord of the Rings exists.
We don't know that.
Yes, we do. Lord of the Rings exists, okay? The sun is not even up. Lord of the Rings has sun. There is sunshine in the Lord of the Rings, okay? We have Hobbiton, a beautiful land of sun and growing things. And
another option is instead of escaping, he could plead his cause and be forgiven. That's another option.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't say he escapes.
Well, you did say he
You said,
well, no, not that he escaped. He could be released, right?
Okay.
Set free.
Okay. Yeah. Cameron, to your question, I think because he did ask for pardon and they denied him, so I think they can't kill him or won't kill him, no matter how big his crime. I think only because they didn't.
Because death is the gift to the children of Ilúvatar. Death is not something that it's a different. I mean, it's similar to angels and demons, right? You can't just there's no end to an angel or a demon's existence.
But The difference between like matter and spirit, there's no death to the spirit.
Yeah, and the Valar take on physical form as a raiment, as clothing. So it wouldn't make sense to kill them.
Yeah. Interesting.
Just going back to something earlier, really quick. It's when they're talking about the dread of Melkor's like creations and the riders and all of that kind of stuff. I found it so like creepy that if any of the elves, this is what is in the Silmarillion, if any of the elves strayed far abroad alone or few together, they would often vanish and never return. And the Quendi said that the hunter had caught them and they were afraid.
Oh.
That was just I was like, am I reading Stranger Things right now? Like it's
Yeah. But they're talking about Orome.
I don't think they are.
You don't think they are?
I don't think they are. What page are you guys on? Because we're all reading the second edition.
Well, they might have thought that it was Orome who had caught them, but they say the hunter, right? Which is another name for Orome. But the reality is that they're talking about Melkor
right.
and these shadows and evil spirits to spy and waylay them. So I don't think they know what's going on. They just know that we haven't seen Wilfin for like a few days now, and he's just gone. And then people just start telling stories about like how he disappeared.
Yeah, Greg, I think you're right. I think the hunter is the name they've given Orome.
Yeah.
To it's like their lore about him, because that Melkor has put fear in their hearts, and now
but there are also evils that Melkor has released into the world too.
They did actually vanish.
Yeah, they vanished. We don't know.
Balrogs and
yeah, we don't know how, right? But we probably know that it wasn't Orome, right? But in their lore, in their minds, it's like this sort of being that is beyond them, and they don't fully understand.
Which is scary.
His ways are.
To be captured by Melkor makes Mountain Doom look like summer camp.
Yeah.
He's scary.
And now we have the appearance of riders as well, which are kind of like almost a mockery to Orome riding on his horse, but we now have these dark servants as riders. As now Melkor greatly hated, feared the riding of Orome, and he sent indeed his dark servants as riders.
Yeah, it's always that corruption of the good thing, and sowing distrust and fear, right? Yeah. So by making something akin to Orome as rider, he's confusing like what is good and what is evil.
Right, because then the Quendi would see Orome and they would tell stories. There's this man on a horse, he's big, he's powerful. And then later on, someone else would witness maybe an attack from one of the Dark Riders and be like, a powerful Dark Rider came and attacked us. So they conflate the two together. Scary.
That's cool. The last thing I want to talk about is the last thing that happened. So basically, the Valar gather and council after they imprison Melkor, and they're divided in this debate. Should we let the elves just heal Middle Earth, kind of restore what was once dark now that Melkor is imprisoned? But then others say, no, we should protect them. Let's bring them here. Let's bring them here to the trees, to our fortress, and keep them safe here. And then I think it's interesting that Orome is the one to travel to them. And then at first they don't want to follow him. They think, well, this is a nice story, but how are we supposed to believe there's this place in the far west with these trees and these other beings like yourself? So then what's so interesting is they send ambassadors, and these are important names: Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. To go see if it's legit.
We need 3 more minutes after this as well for one question, because there's an important thing that happened that I need you guys to interpret.
I'll interpret it for you. A note on the Ingwes. I mean, the ways is we have a rule on this podcast where even though online you'll find pronunciation that says Ingwe, Finwe,
Finwe,
Elwe,
Ingwe,
Orome.
Orome.
It's really hard to say that and sound cool. So we're going with the ways and the maze.
Yep. So back to your thing, Cameron.
So final thing. If you guys don't have anything to add, just for people to note that we have different names of elves coming into the fore now. We have, so we know Eldar and Quendi, but now there's the Avari, who are the ones that stayed back. They're the unwilling. And then what are the name? Eldar.
Mm-hmm.
Eldar are the ones that come. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's like a sundering, that's what it's called.
Right.
Then befell the first sundering of the elves, right? And it's because Ingwe, and for the most part of the kindreds of Finwë and Elwë, were swayed by the words of their lords and were willing to depart and follow Orome. And these were known ever after as the Eldar, right? So you have the Quendi, and the Eldar came from the Quendi, right? Because
yes,
this is the first sundering, I suppose. And then there's another sundering that happens immediately after, the Avari, the unwilling. And so now
the sundering is between the Eldar and the Avari.
Yeah, so the Quendi is all of the elves at the very beginning.
But they were only known as the Quendi first.
Yep.
Right.
So now there's like sort of sub factions, I suppose.
Right.
Yep, that's correct.
Of them.
Can't recommend the book more highly or whatever, because it has little charts that describe all this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, which book? Sorry. Which book?
Anyway,
Silmarillion?
The Silmarillion.
Wait,
the
what
one that
book's
we're
that?
reading.
It's the one we're reading.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Wait, is that why you were just making up the part you were reading last time? You weren't even reading out of the book.
Yeah, no, I thought we were reading a different book.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so there we go. Yeah, I've got it here.
Yeah.
Go check out our YouTube channel, guys. Search Before the Fellowship, and then you can see Dan holding up his book in the screen.
Yeah. You're doing an excellent job of holding it, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. In my screen, there's nothing readable, but I'm just.
It looks
No,
great.
it's perfect. It's perfect.
Here, I can even solo you. Look at that.
Yeah,
Wow.
Look at that. Don't look at my nails. I don't
Okay,
know
so
Okay, but only look at the
elves.
first 2 lines of it, because the rest is nonsense at this point.
Yeah, and it's all
put it back up. That
spoilers.
was awesome.
Spoilers.
Put it back up.
Well, I'm just.
It's really helpful. Okay, Quendi, all the elves, and then we just met the Eldar and the Avari. That's sundering. That's cool. Okay, we're getting into it.
We're getting into it. Okay, so last question. This is the question I have that I need you guys to interpret for me.
Okay.
This is a quote from earlier on in the chapter. I don't have a page number for you. I'm sorry. In that time, the shape of Middle-earth was changed, and the great sea that sundered it from Aman grew wide and deep, and it broke in the coast and made a deep gulf to the southward. Many lesser bays were made between the gulf and Helcaraxe in the north, where Middle-earth and Aman came nigh together. What is happening here? Is Middle-earth becoming more like what we know it from the Lord of the Rings, or is that not even happening yet? It's just continental, like, shifting.
Well, okay, it is becoming more like it, but it's in very slow phases, and this is still, remember, 3 ages. There's still 3 ages of Melkor in prison and stuff. And anyway, what I found at this point, even looking at the maps that are contained in the back of the Silmarillion book, they're not even helpful yet still. For like kind of the bulk of the story, they're still not all that helpful. There's certain features that are present, like you have
maps in the back of your book? Sorry.
Yeah, dude.
Autumno in the north, and there's the big sea that is in between Aman in the west and then Middle Earth, right? And that seems to be growing. But a lot of, and I think it also mentions the river Sirion, which is an important feature, geographically speaking. But a lot of this is still there's just all kinds of turmoil and things changing.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that until this point, Valinor was connected to the rest of Middle-earth. They were just separated by mountains.
I think, I'm not sure. I know there's like, it's kind of like the Bering Strait with like Russia and Alaska, right? There's something kind of like that, some sort of feature where you can cross in the far north, like, and it might even be ice, like the Bering Strait or something like that.
That's after this destruction.
Okay.
So and then I know there's going to be Tolkien nerds who I love. I love you guys who are going to correct me on everything. Correct us.
Yeah, correct.
But I believe it's just the mountain kind of kingdom, Valinor. They set up these mountains to kind of, and then, you know, Melkor sets up his fortress. But after this battle, then it says that Valinor and Middle-earth are separated now by a great gulf, a great sea that sundered it and grew wide and deep. So I think now it's separated by water. I think that's really the big difference. Before it was like
but Helcaraxi is mountains, right? Is that right?
No, that's like the icy. That's the thing you're talking about, like the ice path, like the Antarctica.
Grinding ice. That's what
grinding ice.
The grinding ice.
Which I love.
That's a glacier. That's a glacier.
A what?
What else could it does a how would you say it in American? It's a glacier.
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 It's a glacier.
You got it. Now I understand it.
Glacier. It's a glacier. That's grinding ice. That's what grinding ice.
What was that word that came out of your mouth?
It's English, you know, from the country England. I was asked the other day at the winery,
America.
What's your first language? Is it French? I said to them, no, it's not. It's English. They wait, English as in English.
As in Texas?
Pointing to themselves. Like, woman, you're 50-something years old.
Okay, you know what it is? I'm serious about this. It's because the word English doesn't have an A in it.
Is that why?
I think that's why.
What? That doesn't make any sense. England has an A in it, but like way in the middle, like towards the latter half. America has an A at the beginning. England has an E at the beginning. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but Donald Trump invented English.
She was convinced that English was like English like us, like and she even said and got stuck. Because she realized that she couldn't say America. Like, anyway, sorry. Good night, people.
If you like what you hear,
please return. Please come back after this.
Please come back next week. Sorry, it went long. Go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. The joke keeps getting funnier.
This week you can rate us 1. It's fine.
No, rate us 1 out of 1.
Yeah, okay, max.
Follow us everywhere at Before the Fellowship and send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. Join us next week as we read the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.